Let's go back to 1987. Wall Street was booming. The personal computer revolution was in full swing, and companies were spending billions on this amazing new thing called information technology. Everyone agreed. We were entering a new age where workers would become superhumanly efficient. But there was a problem. A brilliant economist named Robert Solow, who would win the Nobel Prize that same year, looked at all the economic data. He looked at GDP, he looked at output per worker, and he saw nothing. The massive investment in computers had produced zero statistically significant improvement in productivity. In fact, productivity growth had actually slowed down. Solow famously wrote, "You can see the computer age everywhere but in the productivity statistics." This became known as the productivity paradox. It is the baffling economic mystery of why investing in revolutionary technology often fails to make us richer or faster, at least for a very long time. It challenges the core belief of Silicon Valley that technology automatically equals progress. So, why did this happen? If you give a writer a computer, they write faster than on a typewriter, right? If you give an accountant a spreadsheet, they calculate faster, don't they? Yes, but personal efficiency is not the same as systemic productivity. The main explanation for this paradox comes from something called general purpose technologies, or GPT, is a technology that changes everything, like steam power, electricity, or the computer. But history shows us that these powerful technologies don't boost productivity right away. In fact, when they're first introduced, they often lower it. Why? Because you have to stop working to learn the new tool. You have to rewire the building, rewrite the manual, and even change the laws. This creates what's called a J-curve. First, there's the investment phase. You buy the tech, costs go up, and productivity actually dips. Then comes the adjustment phase. You're figuring out how to use the new tool, and productivity stays flat. Finally, you reach the explosion phase. Society finally reorganizes itself around the technology, and productivity skyrockets. When Robert Solow was looking at the data in 1987, he was deep inside that adjustment phase. He was judging the computer before it had finished changing the world. To really get this, we have to look at the electric motor paradox of the 1890s. The economic historian Paul David noticed something fascinating. The electric motor was invented in the 1880s, and by 1900, factories were buying them. But for 40 years, until 1920, American manufacturing productivity didn't budge. Electricity did nothing for the economy. The reason came down to factory design. In the 19th century, factories were powered by huge single-steam engines. Because of this, you had to arrange all your machines based on access to power, not logic or workflow. A massive steel drive shaft ran down the center of the ceiling, and leather belts connected every machine to it. The factory had to be built vertically with multiple stories, just to be close to the power source. It was dark, dangerous, and incredibly rigid. When electricity arrived, factory owners made a huge mistake. They simply took out the giant steam engine and replaced it with one giant electric motor. They left the shafts, they left the belts, and they left the terrible layout. The result? The factory wasn't faster. It was just quieter. They had basically just electrified the old way of doing things. It wasn't until the 1920s that a new generation of managers had a breakthrough. They realized, wait, with small electric motors, we can put a motor on each machine. If we do that, we don't need the drive shaft. And if we don't need the shaft, we can arrange the machines in the order of the workflow. They started building single-story factories with skylights and invented the assembly line. Only after they completely redesigned the entire factory floor, a process that took over 30 years, did productivity finally explode. The technology itself wasn't enough. They needed organizational innovation. In 1987, companies were doing the exact same thing with computers, just using them to type old-fashioned memos a little faster instead of reinventing their workflows. Another fascinating part of the paradox is the relationship between automation and jobs. We tend to assume that better tech means fewer workers, which means higher productivity per worker. Let's look at the ATM. When automated teller machines became widespread in the 90s, everyone predicted the death of the human bank teller. The ATM was faster, cheaper, and worked 24/7. Logically, banks would fire all their tellers. But an economist named James Bessen looked at the data. Between 1995 and 2010, the number of bank tellers in the United States actually went up. How is that possible? Well, the ATM paradox works like this. The machine reduced the cost of operating a bank branch. Because it was cheaper to open a branch, banks opened more branches. And because there were more branches, they needed more tellers. But the job of the teller completely changed. Before the ATM, a teller was basically a human calculator. They just counted cash all day, a boring, low productivity job. After the ATM, the machine handled the cash. The teller was freed up to become a relationship manager. They started focusing on high-value tasks like selling loans, solving complex customer problems, and providing better service. The technology didn't replace the worker. It redefined the worker's role. This also helps explain why the productivity stats are so messy. The output of a teller shifted from transactions processed, which is easy to count, to customer satisfaction, which is much harder to measure. Now, there's a darker side to the productivity paradox that is very relevant to us today. It is the idea that new technology often creates more complexity and what is called shadow work. Back in the 1970s, a corporate executive had a secretary. If that executive needed to go to London, they'd just say, "Book me a flight." The secretary, who was a specialist, would handle it in 5 minutes. The high-value executive could spend their time strategizing. Today, that same executive has Expedia. They might spend 45 minutes comparing flight prices, entering their credit card info, and managing their own itinerary. Technically, the task of booking a flight became more efficient because there are no phone calls. But organizationally, we took a high-paid executive and turned them into a low-paid travel agent. We shifted the administrative burden from support staff onto the professionals themselves. We see this every day with email and Slack. Communication is instant, which should be efficient. But because it's instant, the volume is infinite. According to McKinsey, knowledge workers now spend around 28% of their week just reading and answering email. We spend our days coordinating work instead of actually doing the work. The very tools that were supposed to speed us up have become a ball and chain of constant interruption. This is the drag of the attention economy on our productivity. We have incredibly powerful computers, but our attention spans are shattered. Finally, it's possible that Solow was wrong simply because we are bad at measuring value. GDP, our primary economic yardstick, measures things we buy and sell. If you buy a set of Encyclopedia Britannica for $1,000, that adds $1,000 to GDP. If you use Wikipedia for free, that adds $0 to GDP. But is the Wikipedia user worse off? Of course not. They have access to vastly more knowledge than the encyclopedia owner ever did. The value is immense, but the price is zero. The digital economy is filled with this kind of consumer surplus that doesn't show up in productivity statistics. Google Maps is free. GPS is free. Music streaming is incredibly cheap. Our standard of living has clearly improved. But because the digital world makes things cheaper or free, it looks like low growth in the official numbers. The paradox might not be in the technology, but in the ruler we use to measure it. So, where does that leave us today? We are facing a brand new wave, artificial intelligence. Generative. I like ChatGPT is the new steam engine, the new Dynamo. And right now we're hearing the exact same promises. This will double human productivity. But we're also seeing the same J-curve play out. Companies are spending billions on AI chips, but they haven't really figured out how to use them yet. They're jamming AI into old workflows, just like that electric motor in the steam-powered factory. Lawyers are using AI to write memos faster, but they haven't reinvented the legal system. Coders are writing code faster, but they haven't reinvented software architecture. If history and Robert Saleh's paradox are a guide, we should not expect a massive productivity boom this year or the next. We should expect a messy, confusing period of adjustment. We will see costs go up, we will see confusion, and we will likely see that initial productivity dip. The real boom will only come when we stop using new tools to do old things and start doing new things that were previously impossible. The paradox isn't a failure of technology. It's a challenge to our imagination. Thanks for watching. If you found this interesting, don't forget to like and subscribe for more deep dives into the ideas that shape our world.